Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the discussion on California government. In this video, we're going to cover the 3 branches of the state government, starting with the California legislature, pictured here by its legislative building in Sacramento, California. Now, going back to data, we can see that the California legislature is overwhelmingly comprised of Democratic politicians. We see that in the Senate, Democrats make up 65% of the Senate, 65% of the lower chamber called the Assembly, and that's significant because we recognize that there is a large portion of the electorate in California who are Democratic voters. Republicans by 2016 made up 35% of the state Senate, 35% of the Assembly, and that's because of the fewer numbers of registered Republicans. So what do we gather from this slide? It's to note that California's politicians, at least in their state legislature, are overwhelmingly Democratic, most often liberal, supporters with liberal ideologies. So when we think about our state legislature, we can compare it and contrast it from the United States Congress, our federal legislature. And there are some key differences. The first we're going to cover is all about term limits. So in the United States Congress, members of Congress can serve unlimited terms. And you may often hear of stories of senators running for 10 terms, over 20 years, 30 years. And the nature of the job suggests that members of Congress, if they keep getting reelected, they can serve for as long as they want. In the California legislature, that is not the same. California legislators are limited to a total of 12 years. That's it. You can only serve in the California legislative branch for 12 years, and you can serve these 12 years in one house or both houses, some combination of the state assembly or the state senate. Now, one thing to note is that this passed via ballot initiative back in 2012. California voters wanted to remodel their legislative branch. And what we see is an increasing crop of new faces, new people in the legislature because legislators can only serve for 12 years, then they have to depart. So we can see that this can have some effects on our legislature. Just think about, the difference between experience and new faces, new blood in the legislative branch. That is the dilemma, because when you limit legislators to a total of 12 years, you may lose the ability to generate long-standing agreements between very tenured legislators. Nonetheless, this is what California voters adopted in 2012, and it's up to us to analyze its effects. Another difference from the United States Congress is something called the line item veto. Now, to contrast this in its relationship to Congress, when we think of a bill that has passed by Congress, the president has very few options available. The president can sign the bill into law, or the president can veto the bill, therefore making it unenforceable, not part of the law books. Now, presidents can see this as an all or nothing situation. They either have to sign everything or they can reject everything. Even if there's some parts that they like, they have to be willing to sign every bill in its entirety. Now, the California legislature, as far as it goes, the California governor can use what's called the line item veto on appropriations. These are spending bills passed by the state legislature. What this allows the governor to do is reduce or eliminate spending on a specific item. Now, when we think about reducing or eliminating a specific spending item, we can think of things like a transportation bill. The governor may be presented with a transportation bill, and the transportation bill may allocate millions of dollars in funds for new highways in San Francisco, Torrance, Compton, Mission Viejo. It can spread it around all as the legislators see fit. But when the governor gets a hold of this bill, the governor can then begin to make specific cuts to specific items that he or she does not necessarily agree with. And so this will allow the governor to keep the portions that he wants, but also allow the governor to cut the portions he or she does not want. So when we think about this line item veto, it is something that presidents wish they had, because remember, presidents must sign everything or veto everything. California governor has a lot of power over the legislature because the California governor can keep the items that he or she would like and remove the items all the way entirely to $0 in spending. Now, keep in mind, this does not allow the governor to increase spending whatsoever. The California governor cannot allocate funds, repurpose them, move funds around from certain areas into other areas. No, this is all about reducing and eliminating spending. The governor cannot increase funding. So the line item veto gives the governor plenty of options to refine and shape legislature, especially with regards to spending, something the president might wish they have. I mean, Bill Clinton in the 1990s, he would like to have done a line item veto. President Trump has raised the prospect of using a line item veto. Now, in a separate video from the Washington Post, I am going to show this, what the line item veto means in practice and why presidents cannot do them, as opposed to our California governor, which is allowed under the California Constitution. So check that out. Another difference from the United States Congress comes in the form of filibusters. In the United States Congress, filibusters are allowed, and this can lead to blocks or delays of specific votes on action. But in the California legislative branch, filibusters are not allowed. But this does not mean that California's legislature isn't subject to some hurdles. Take, for example, that if you want to increase taxes or add a constitutional amendment from the legislature, you're going to require a 2/3 vote from both houses. This is very difficult. And so while Congress may struggle to pass any bill, California's legislators are going to struggle because, keep in mind, even though Democratic legislators had 65 votes in the Senate, 65% of the power in the Assembly, that is something to be contested because that is not an outright 2/3 majority. And so this leads to the ability for the legislature to back down on spending if they don't have the high supermajority votes. Now let's move to the executive branch. And to understand how California's executive branch works, we should understand what it means for Californians to have a plural elected executive branch. So let's set the stage by talking about the federal government. The President of the United States is the single elected member of the federal executive branch. When we talk about the executive branch, keep in mind it houses millions of government employees in the military and in the civilian sector, the civilian operations of that executive branch. But the governor lacks a power that the president has. The president can fire members of the cabinet for any reason. Members of the cabinet, these leaders in the federal executive branch, they can be fired for any reason. They serve at the pleasure of the president, meaning if the president likes their job they're doing, they keep their job. And if the president does not like the job these cabinet members are doing, then the president can ask for their resignation or just outright fire them. This is different in California because in California, we don't have a single elected member of the state executive branch. We have 8 elected offices within the California elected executive branch. There are many offices, and we elect the governor, but we also elect a lieutenant governor, a California Secretary of State, a California Attorney General. Since these offices are elected by the people, our Constitution mandates that the governor cannot fire them, that these officials only be held accountable to voters. And we're going to see how this can impact potential decision-making amongst the executive branch. Let's talk about the governor. Our current governor is Gavin Newsom. He won his election in 2018, and his responsibilities, the responsibilities of any California governor, are to prepare the budget. The governor is supremely powerful over the budget, over allocating where our tax-paying dollars go to. The governor also has the power, like the president, to sign or veto bills either in their entirety or make specific cuts on spending items under the line item veto. The lieutenant governor has some powers as well. Here is our current lieutenant governor, Eleni Kounalakis. And the lieutenant governor's major task is to replace the governor if the governor cannot meet certain conditions, certain standards set by the Constitution. The Constitution says if the governor is incapacitated, think of a coma, think of away, kidnapped, you can think of any number of reasons the governor cannot be available to do their job. The lieutenant governor will take over. The lieutenant governor also takes over for the governor if the governor leaves office early for any reason. If they resign or if they are removed from office by the voters, the lieutenant governor can fill that role until a new governor is elected. Now, what's peculiar about the lieutenant governor is that the lieutenant governor can also replace the governor if the governor leaves the state. And so you will often hear stories of governors maybe being hesitant to leave the state unless they have the trust in their lieutenant governor. Because once the lieutenant governor gains the power after the governor leaves the seat, they can sign bills, prepare budgetary items, appoint people to specific offices. So this is something that lieutenant governors have. And keep in mind, the governor and lieutenant governor are elected separately, and therefore they do not always need to see eye to eye on the issues. Keep in mind, president and vice president of the United States, they are elected together. They share the ballot together, and therefore it is typically expected they can work together. Now, since Eleni Kounalakis and Gavin Newsom are both Democrats, we should expect that there is not going to be as much tension. But you could imagine a scenario where the governor is elected by one party and the lieutenant governor is elected by a different political party. This can lead to complications. However, it has not happened in the modern era. Moving on to the Attorney General, we can think of our current Attorney General, Javier Becerra. He enforces laws. Okay, whenever there's criminal codes or criminal statutes, this Attorney General is responsible for making sure that the law is being followed. And how do you enforce the law? Well, we know that the Attorney General is not out on the streets patrolling every night, making sure that citizens are living up to the laws. But the Attorney General can direct the district attorneys in the various districts around the state and basically tell them what to prioritize. If there are certain types of crimes the Attorney General sees are more important, then the Attorney General can tell his district attorneys what to do in those situations. The Attorney General also is noted for defending the state in lawsuits, and so if California is ever sued, well, the Attorney General can either defend the state by himself or appoint a team. It's up to the discretion of the Attorney General. Now, there are more offices that we as California voters, we elect. Take, for example, the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State of California, they are California's chief records official. They hold elections. They oversee the vote counting efforts and making sure that our voting records are certified. They also house the archives of the state. The state treasurer manages state money, including investments and bond sales. The insurance commissioner, if we think about insurance companies, if there's any shady business going on, well, the insurance commissioner can represent you in trying to regulate those insurance companies. The state controller monitors collection of taxes, provides fiscal controls for receipts and payments. This allows the controller to engage in auditing and account for every dollar spent by the legislative branch and allocated by the governor. Finally, we have a superintendent of public instruction, and this person administers the state role in public education. They oversee what is happening across the board, across the state in California's K through 12 school districts, its community college districts, its CSU and UC systems as well. So when we think of these offices, remember, what makes them the plural executive is that we elect these officials one by one. And so you may see a Secretary of State, a treasurer, come from various different political backgrounds. Maybe they won't always see eye to eye, but it makes no difference. The governor cannot fire any one of these officials discussed, unlike the president, who could have fired the equivalent of these in the federal government. Finally, let's touch on the judicial branch. Let's just do one slide of quick facts. California judges are subject to elections. This is different from the federal government, in which the federal government is appointed. The federal judges are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. If you want to be a judge in a superior court like the Los Angeles Superior Court, you have to be elected within their counties. You serve for a term of 6 years, and then you go up for re-election. Voters get to approve whether or not you keep the job as judge. Now, California voters also weigh in on the California Supreme Court. The California Supreme Court judges are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the people in an election, and they will serve for a period of 12 years. Finally, judges are always subject to elections at the end of their terms. And so no matter how effective a judge may be at the job, they need to prove to the people in an election, in a campaign, that they are doing the job to the way that the people like. This is different from the federal government. The federal government was created to keep the people outside of the approval metrics of the judiciary. They wanted an independent judiciary. We have an independent judiciary here in California. However, they are bound to what the public will, the popular will of the people is. So there you have it. We have many differences between the legislative, executive, and judicial branch between the state of California and the federal government. Knowing these differences can see why California's politicians ends up in different policy results than the federal government. Thanks for watching, and we will continue our discussion in the discussion board below. Take care.